Be the Talk, episode 252, featuring Micah Redding. Welcome to Be the Talk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Micah Redding. Micah, are you ready to talk?
Yes, I am. Absolutely.
Micah Redding is a software developer, executive director of the Christian Transhumanist Association. Yes, you heard that correctly. And the host of the Christian Transhumanist Podcast. Micah grew up as a preacher's kid. He spent 8 years as a rock musician, which I love. And he has traveled extensively to places, hotbed places such as Afghanistan during the revolution and a whole bunch of places that I do not have on my list at this time. So I'm going to welcome you, Micah Redding, to the talk.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Thanks very much. Good to be here.
Your talk is called We All Live in the Developing World. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. I've taken notes on all that, but first we got to unpack this Christian Transhumanism podcast and association, everything else. It's kind of fascinating, and I think depending on whether you consider Ben Franklin as being a Christian or a deist, he might have been the first Christian, or whoever invented the spectacles, which I think was Franklin. He might have been our first Christian transhumanist.
Well, he was really interested in all kinds of technological possibilities.
Or the bifocals. I got to say that was the bifocals, not the spectacles, the bifocals. Back to you.
There you go. From what his experiments with, electricity or whatever, all the way to like, he had this idea about, having himself, when he got old, put into a casket of wine. And he was like, maybe that will preserve me for the next few hundred years so I can pop out in the future and see what technologies have developed.
I live in Philadelphia. I live right outside Philadelphia. I've never heard that before. That sounds like something Monty Burns would think of as like a disembodied living head on The Simpsons or something. That is amazing.
Right. Yeah, well, Ben Franklin was really a futurist and kind of ahead of his times. Absolutely.
Well, and you ever come into town, you can actually reach through the fence and you can kind of rub your hand. This is really weird, and some people really don't like this, but you could actually rub your hand on his grave and reach in between, the gate bars and get a little bit of whatever mystical thing that might be. I really shouldn't be saying stuff like this on a recording, but as you could tell, Micah and I have a little bit of chemistry already. So back to the talk. We all live in the developing world. I love this because it's not just a really inspirational idea. You're an idea guy, but you reached into, I think it was Peter Thiel and a bunch of other folks who talk about the vertical progress versus the horizontal progress. And horizontal progress is that incremental, efficiency, continuous improvement, Kaizen kind of thing. But then there's another kind, which is a vertical progress, which is a whole leap of mindset. And it's an exponential leap, and it solves the bigger problems that the lower problems will never be able to solve. So please, Micah, take us behind your talk.
Yeah. So a lot of the thoughts of this came out of, my travels, and from 2008 to 2012, 2015, I traveled to a lot of places in the Middle East, and then into, I think you mentioned Tahrir Square during the Arab Spring, and I ended up in Lagos, Nigeria, and I kind of had a realization that we talk about the developed and the developing world as these two different ideas, right? And I really came to the conclusion that was really doing a disservice to understanding how the world actually works and how it should work and what we should be doing as a society. Because developing sounds like we're in process, and developed sounds like we're done, right? So we have this whole part of the world where we're telling ourselves we're done developing, we're done with what we're becoming. And we have this whole other part of the world that we're saying all they need to do is catch up. All they need to do is that horizontal progress, imitating what's already been done. And my whole point was that actually we all need to be developing something new. We all need to be engaging in that vertical progress.
Well, and the semantics, you're right. They're not only incorrect, that some people are rightfully starting to take offense at that, because it really, it's kind of pejorative. It's like, I've arrived and these folks over here haven't yet, right, which is totally false. And as a example of horizontal progress, we've all got telephone poles outside for these silly landlines that many of us don't have. I certainly, cut the cord a long time ago. I don't think I've ever had a landline in the last 30 years or 20 years, a few years after college, maybe. And I was over in Africa myself a few years ago. Blew my mindset seeing the ladies with the water buckets on their head, just the way that you do in the stereotypes that you see, and they're quaint and charming and everything else. But what blew me away is she's on her cell phone yakking and talking. And there's the same thing with the shepherd boy with the sheep. Oh, this beautiful, bucolic African kind of stereotype thing, but he's on the cell phone. And who needs to dig these stupid holes in the ground or put posts in and do these wires? Africa has leapfrogged over all of that, phone stuff, and it goes down in the ice or whatever that we've all had to deal with. They're on cell phone. They never had to deal with that level of infrastructure waste.
Right. Exactly. And that kind of points to this idea of like, we don't all have to follow the same technological path, right? Like it doesn't just have to be, other places recapping what the U.S. did over the last century. That we actually can jump into these really advanced technologies that work in a different way and have different infrastructure and a different lifestyle. And that's really the key. Is like, I think we have to do that. That's actually essential to what we need to do as a world, as a planet, because it's not just sufficient anymore for us all to imitate each other and all be doing the same thing.
Well, and certainly these interviews bleed into each other, and the sustainability conversation is so huge. I was talking to the organizer of TEDx San Diego last week, and one of his talks is all about the rising middle class in India and China. And if they follow the same path as, England and the United States of America, we're going to have unbelievable unsustainability even beyond where we already are. To prove your point exactly, we've got to find new ways. An hour ago, I was interviewing someone who was talking about the effects of prolonged space travel and how that, we have to solve all those issues as well. So the trajectories, if we can leapfrog over other cultures, they can leapfrog over us. We don't need landlines. We can learn from each other. We can chart a new path. We can hopefully keep a lot of the judgment out of it where it's not needed or helpful. Powerful thing. What are your thoughts about that, Micah?
Yeah, absolutely. The issue that you kind of highlighted there is that if the rest of the world lives like North America does right now, the statistic is we would need 4 Earths to supply that level of resources, right? Like there's just not that it's just not going to work. And the idea that we're faced with a dilemma. On the one hand, as you said, as we have this rising middle class in India and other places, they want things like air conditioning and stuff like that, right? And at the same time, that's a huge potential environmental and ecological disaster. So we're either talking about trying to stop them from developing these technologies, or we're talking about disaster, or we're talking about some other new possibility that has to be created, and it has to be created from all over, not just in one place, not just from one group of people figuring it out.
So we've been enjoying this conversation with Micah Redding. His talk is called "We All Live in the developing world because we're developing on certain different levels. All the reasons that we talked about. Anyway, this is a fun conversation. We're going to have more of it in just a moment in the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And welcome everybody back to the Blitz Round. We're here with Micah Redding. I'm about to ask him a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of his recent talk. Micah, are you ready?
I'm ready.
First question, were you invited to speak or did you apply?
So actually, my mom saw the topic of this of the conference and said, "This is a perfect fit for you. You should apply." And I did. And
all right, it's a little help from mom. That's right. A first, Micah. That's the first. That's great. Love it. That's the first that anybody said this to me on the mic. So, Mom. Good job, Mom. Yeah. We're all grateful for you. All right. All right. Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
So probably it would categorize as blending, but what I did is I knew what I was going to say and I knew what I was going to talk, but I didn't actually practice until the week of, and I really didn't say it until the day before because I wanted it to be so fresh in my mind. Like everything was there, but I wanted to be like really, have it fresh and not have it too stale. So I really pushed it to the edge to keep it engaging for me so that I could keep it engaging for the audience. All
right. So Talk Universe, I'm going to throw myself in here. Don't necessarily try that at home. That works.
I don't recommend
that works. I mean, if you know yourself, if you do a lot of public speaking or a lot of communication and you know how you operate and you have a very firm sense of yourself and a proven track record of being able to do it this way. And this is why I asked the question. And for some people listening, they're thinking I need to do maybe the exact same thing because you had that exact structure in your mind and you didn't want to, I call it, got my little seltzer bottle right here, letting all the fizz out of the presentation ahead of time. So obviously, congratulations, sir. You have pulled it off. So that's as long as you pull it off, it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I don't recommend it to other people, but it is something that works for me, and I have to kind of run that line. Mm-hmm. But yeah, for most people, I would say prepare. All
right. Aside from that, what's a tip, tool, or technique that helped you, Micah?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think just thinking through the emotions that I wanted to feel and being present in those emotions as I'm rehearsing and then as I'm going up onto the stage.
What was the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk?
Yeah, well, so I was the first person on stage, and the person who was hosting forgot my bio, and so had no idea who I was or couldn't introduce me, and so it just said our next person and kind of waved me up, but it was fine, and I got up and talked and it was fine, but that was kind of like a little unnerving right off the bat. So,
that's actually a really important part of the talk is the way that you're introduced. So any organizers or future organizers or people who are volunteer team members, make sure that your next event, that if you're kind of winging it or letting the MC wing it, don't do that. That is not a best practice. That really shouldn't happen. And fortunately, I haven't identified the organization. That's okay. It's, these things can happen, but was this maybe a first year event, or was there maybe a team turnover or something like that you know of? Because that may be a case too.
Yeah, I think that might be the case, and I definitely the person who was doing it this year or that year was definitely new to it. So I'm not sure where the ball was dropped there, but yeah, I think after me they got it all in line and all that. But
well, these are the things. I mean, I have a beta testing course this week, and my first group of people going through the Get Accepted course, and this is some of the stuff that we talk about in the later part of that course, because it's really important, because you're auditioning the organization just like they're auditioning you. So enough about that. It's a little bit of a commercial, but these are what it's really important to do that. And it's really important, back to Micah, good for you, sir, that you were flexible enough not to get too high strung about that. You just kind of roll with it. I guess if you're in a war zone in Afghanistan and some of these other places, somebody forgets to read your bio, not that big of a deal. So let's put it all in perspective. And you know what? Even if you haven't been in the middle of a war zone somewhere, not a big deal for you too, because it's always a privilege to be on that stage. So, we've been enjoying this talk with Micah Redding. His talk is called, my tablet has fallen asleep right here. Micah's talk is called "We All Live in the Developing World," and his talk can be viewed, a link on it, can be viewed at BeTheTalk.com. We'll have a link right there. We'll also have a link to Micah's website. It's MicahRedding.com, MicahRedding, MicahRedding.com. And in just a moment, we will have the final word of advice. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back with the final word of advice from Micah Redding.
Yeah, I would say the future matters, and if you can if you can travel, it can expand your imagination of what kinds of futures are possible. And if you can't travel, read good fiction books and watch good movies, because expanding your imagination really makes for a better world, makes for a better life, and I'd recommend it to everybody.
Micah Redding, thank you so much for carving out time to come on the talk today and share your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.